Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another Sister for Sister story time session with your favorite sister, Shaya Faya. Today we are talking about what's the name of this one? 88 Travelers, Demons in the City, Chicago Ley Lines, Key of Solomon, and Meet Me at the Crossroad. Put it on the screen. One second. Just put the title on the screen. Okay, whatever. Anyway, I'll do it in a second. Let's see here. So, the travelers, the DeLorean time machine. So, in Back to the Future franchise, the DeLorean time machine is a time travel vehicle constructed from a retrofitted DMC DeLorean. Its time travel ability is derived from the flux capacitor, a component that allows the car to travel to the past or future, though not through space. This occurs when the car accelerates to 88 miles per hour and requires 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. In 2021, the time machine was added to the Library of Congress's National Historic Vehicle Register. Interesting. The control of the time machine is the same in all three films. The operator is seated inside the DeLorean, except the first time when the remote control is used, and turns on the time circuits by turning a handle near the gear lever, activating a unit containing multiple 14 and 7 segment displays. 714 or 777 that show the destination red, present green, and last departed yellow dates and times. After entering a target date with the keypad inside the DeLorean, the operator accelerates the car to 88 miles per hour, 142 kilometers per hour, which activates the flux capacitor. As it accelerates, several coils around the body glow blue and white, while a burst of light appears in front of it. Surrounded by an electric current similar to a Tesla coil, the whole car vanishes in a flash of white and blue light seconds later, leaving a pair of fiery tire tracks. A digital speedometer is attached to the dashboard so that the operator can accurately gauge the car's speed. Various proposals have been brought forth in the past by fans of the movie franchise for why the car has to be moving at 88 miles per hour to achieve temporal displacement. But actually, the production crew chose the velocity simply because they liked how it looked on the speedometer, modified for the movie. The actual speedometer on the production DeLorean's dashboard only goes up to 85 miles per hour, and the car itself was criticized for being underpowered. Observers outside the vehicle see an implosion of plasma as the vehicle disappears, leaving behind a trail of fire aligned with the DeLorean's tires, which can also appear in midair, while occupants within the vehicle see a quick flash of light and instantaneously arrive at the target time in the same spatial location relative to the Earth as when it departed. In the destination time, immediately before the car's arrival, three large and loud flashes occur at the point from which the car emerges from its time travel. After the trip, the exterior of the DeLorean is extremely cold, and frost forms from atmospheric moisture all over the car's body. Vents on the back heat the vehicle after time travel. The DeLorean suffers assorted malfunctions and damage over the course of the trilogy. In the first film, the car has starter problems and has a hard time restarting once stopped, much to Marty's repeated frustration. In the second film, the destination time display malfunctions and begins to show a series of random dates, causing Doc to be sent back to 1885 when the DeLorean is struck by lightning with him inside. In the third film, a note left by Doc's 1885 self reveals that the DeLorean's flying circuits, added by him in 2015, were destroyed by the strike. After Marty travels back to 1885, the fuel line and fuel injection manifold both suffer damage, leaving the car unable to move under its own power. The time machine is electric and requires a power input of 1.21 gigawatts or 1,620,000 HP to operate, originally provided by a plutonium-fueled nuclear reactor. In the first film, following Marty's accidental trip from 1985 to 1955, Doc has no access to plutonium in 1955. So he outfits the car with a large pole and hook in order to channel the power of a lightning bolt into the flux capacitor and send Marty back to 1985. During Doc's first visit to 2015, he has the machine refitted to fly in addition to standard road driving, and he replaces the nuclear reactor with a Mr. Fusion generator that uses garbage as fuel. Although the Mr. Fusion unit provides the required power for the time machine, the DeLorean is still powered by an internal combustion engine for propulsion. The fuel line is damaged during Marty's trip to 1885 in Back to the Future Part 3. After he and Doc patch it, they attempt to use whiskey as a replacement fuel since commercial gasoline is not yet available. The test fails, damaging the car's fuel injection manifold and leaving it unable to travel under its own power. Doc and Marty consider options to reach the required 88 miles per hour, such as pulling it with horses, which fails because the car barely breaks 30 miles per hour, and ultimately settle on pushing the car with a steam locomotive. They replace the DeLorean's standard wheels with a set designed to mate with train rails for the extra power needed to push it up to speed. Doc adds his own version of Presto logs, a chemically treated mixture of pressed wood and anthracite, to the locomotive's boiler and chooses a location with a straight section of track long enough to achieve 88 miles per hour. Gigawatts. The power required is pronounced in the film as 1.21 gigawatts, with a gigawatt referring to 1 billion watts. The spelling of gigawatts is used in the script and was also the spelling used in the closed captioning in earlier home video versions of the film. However, The correct spelling is gigawatts. Although rarely used, the J sound at the beginning of the SI prefix giga is an acceptable pronunciation. Later versions of closed captioning, such as in the 2020 DVD trilogy release, have corrected the spelling to gigawatts, Giga. In the DVD commentary for Back to the Future, Bob Gale states that he had thought it was pronounced this way because it was how a scientific advisor for the film pronounced it. The gigawatts, Jigo watts spelling is used by Alan Dean Foster in the novelizations of the second and third films. So, time circuits. The time circuits are an integral part of the DeLorean time machine. They were built with an input device and a display. The display was divided into three sections: destination time, shown in red, present time, shown in green, and last time departed, shown in yellow, all annotated with dymo labels. Each display includes a month, a day, a year, and the hour and minutes in that point in time. The years on the time circuits were limited to 4 digits, and there were no possible negative years that could be reached. For example, years before 0 AD or 1 BC. This means the DeLorean could travel to any time from 12 o'clock a.m. on January 1st, 1 BC to 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, AD 9999. The destination time display shows the date that the operator wants the DeLorean to go to. When the operator types in a date using the keypad in the DeLorean, it will be shown in the destination time display. The present time display shows the DeLorean's current location and time, and the last time departed display shows what point in time the DeLorean originally was after making a journey through time. Doc demonstrated its capabilities to Marty after its first test, giving two well-known but erroneous dates as examples: the signing of the Declaration of the Independence, July 4th, 1776, and the birth of Christ, December 25th, 0000. He also displayed the day that he first conceived of the flux capacitor, by which he marks the day he invented time travel, November 5th, 1955, as he explains to Marty in the beginning of the first film. November 5th, that's Sam's birthday. During the second film, because of Biff Tannen's tampering following his theft of the DeLorean, the time circuits began malfunctioning, displaying January 1st, 1885 in the destination time display. A bolt of lightning triggers the malfunction to send the DeLorean from 1955 to 1885. Though the vehicle was in mid-air, the spin created the lightning bolt allowed it to reach 88 miles per hour. Doc is trapped in 1885, and repairs were impossible because the time circuit controlled microchip, which governed the time circuits, was destroyed by the lightning bolt, and suitable replacement parts would not be invented until at least 1947. Doc places repair instructions and a schematic diagram in the time machine to enable his 1955 counterpart to repair it using components from that era. Sorry. So that included vacuum tubes before boarding it up with a silver mine. He then writes Marty a letter explaining the situation and places it in the custody of Western Union with instructions to deliver it to Marty in 1955. Yeah. So the time machine went through several variations during product production of the film Back to the Future. In the first draft of the screenplay, the time machine was a laser device that was housed in a room. At the end of the draft, the device was attached to a refrigerator and taken to a nuclear bomb test. Spielberg vetoed the idea, concerned that children might attempt to climb into one. Uh, Zemeckis suggested the DeLorean because it offered mobility, a unique design, and would appear like an alien UFO to a 1950s family due to its characteristic gull-wing doors, which were inspired by the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL. Okay, so let's take a look at a different um, example of time travel in the Vampire Diaries. So this is the Vampire Diaries wiki, fandom.com page. So, okay. So this is Olivia to Jeremy about the travelers in Rescue Me. They're more like the ugly stepsister. Travelers have a grudge toward anyone that draws their magic from nature. Something about witches cursing the land to turn it against them. Now they're on the move. The Travelers are a mysterious, several millennia once powerful, cursed subculture of witches who have presumably been transmitting the knowledge of their spells from one generation to another since their emergence around the time of the Roman Empire in modern Europe. Silas and Ketsia were said to be the most powerful members during their time and possibly the two most powerful members of all time. However, Silas became immortal, rendering him unable to practice magic, and Ketsia was later killed by the group for making immortality achievable. They also kept Amara's body, which was used as the anchor for the other side, hidden for thousands of years until Ketsia brought herself back to life and located it with her magic. Very little is known about the structure of the group, but membership seems to be earned by birthright, and people are still considered members even when they lose the ability to use their magical powers, such as, for example, as a result of becoming a vampire. True to their name, travelers adopt a nomadic lifestyle. They are constantly on the move. For this reason, it is possible for outside factions to hire their services at the right price. The group serves as the de facto main antagonist of the fifth season. Tensions have been rising between the travelers and other witch covens for centuries, and the threat of war is in the air. In Resident Evil, Marcos explains that after Silas and Ketsia created the spell for immortality, it caused a schism among the witches. Some were conservatives who wanted to maintain the balance of nature by not using magic to create abnormalities such as the immortals. This faction eventually became all those witches who wanted to serve nature. On the other hand, a group of witches that would become the travelers known today believed that they could use their pure magic to perform greater things, much like a member of theirs, Ketsia, had created immortality. The witches, fearing the power the travelers possessed and the things they could do to the world, placed a curse on their entire subculture to prevent them from using traditional forms of magic and from gathering and settling as a tribe. The curse made them who they are due to its effects. The travelers created a new form of magic and found ways around the curse, such as the creation of the passengers, so they could gather without fear of repercussion and without the witches noticing. It is worth noting that despite being nothing more than cursed witches with mastery over a darker form of witchcraft, travelers deny the fact that they are witches, possibly due to the hate and jealousy they feel towards all witches, stating that once the travelers were cursed, perversions of pure magic appeared, much to their dismay, which caused a dramatic and irreversible change in their very nature as a species. Witches share this too, as they directly deny that the travelers are witches, most likely out of contempt. History. The travelers were an ancient community of gifted witches who apparently used powerful magic to achieve great things, including things that were frowned upon by other witches. Ketsia and Silas were two members of the travelers and considered to be their most powerful members. However, things changed for the travelers when the two created a spell for immortality. When it was used on Silas and Amara, it caused a severe schism in the entire witch community, possibly over the subject of immortality itself and the possibilities that came with being a witch. The community was divided between those witches who sought to preserve what they saw as the natural balance of the world by using their powers for that aim, and those who believed they could use it to do anything. Fearing the power that could be unleashed on the world thanks to this use of magic, a group of powerful witches called upon the spirits and then placed a curse on Ketsia's entire coven. The curse prevented them from gathering a tribe, an act which would cause disasters such as plagues, fires, and earthquakes whenever they gathered. Also, they no longer had access to traditional magic sources. However, the travelers eventually discovered that the curse only prevented them from gathering inside their own bodies, and that only magic coming from the earth was forbidden to them. They discovered a different way to practice magic and used it to create the passengers as a means to gather undetected by the other witches and for them to avoid the curse by using other people's bodies. The travelers also remained together and avoided the curse by never stopping anywhere more than one night. This also allowed them to prevent the witches from finding them. Witch covens, such as the Gemini coven, tried to track the travelers for millennia, but they were never able to find them. This led to centuries of war between the travelers and the witches. The travelers also began to believe that the now dominant form of magic, spirit magic, was a perversion of the magic they considered to be pure, and they became determined to have their revenge on the witches by destroying that perversion. Hope remained for the travelers, as an ancient prophecy stated that the blood of the doppelgangers, the shadow selves of Silas and Amara, would be able to reverse spirit magic. It would also allow them to lift the curse placed on them. However, as the doppelgangers were separated, their leader in the 5th century, Marcos, cast a spell which would make them fall in love with one another to make them easier to find. Marcos died eventually and went to the other side, where he continued to lead the travelers for the next 1500 years. However, for the blood of the doppelgangers to work, it needed to be only the very last remaining pair, for that to happen. Both the other doppelgangers and their originals needed to die. In, uh, in order to accomplish their goal, the travelers tried to get their hands on Silas and Amara, but a vengeful Ketsia had imprisoned Silas on a desolate island with the only known cure for immortality. Amara had been mummified by Ketsia, and her death had been faked to hurt Silas. Unable to get their hands on Silas, the travelers killed Ketsia and took Amara's desiccated body, which they kept for 2,000 years. For the next 2,000 years, the travelers wandered the world, evading the witches and seeking the doppelgangers. Nadia Petrova, a vampire descended from a traveler line and whose mother, Katerina, was one of Amara's doppelgangers, claimed that given their few possessions, the travelers often sold their services, possibly as mercenary witches. Okay, so we've got the movies. It's 404. That's Atlanta's area code. We know when we see errors on the computer, it's always 404 error. The Bible said that they have erred in their ways. Okay, let's see. Who are real travelers? So, alleged time travel technology. Die Glock, the Bell, is a purported Nazi time machine that was supposedly part of a flying saucer. The Chronovisor. Italian Benedictine monk Pellegrino Ernetti claimed to have used a time viewer which could film the past without sound, called a chronovisor, to obtain a photograph of the crucifixion of Jesus and view scenes from ancient Rome, including a performance of the lost play Theseus. According to author Paul J. Nahin, a short story by Horace Gold using the pen name Dudley Dale, called The Biography Project, published in Galaxy Science Fiction magazine, may have influenced Ernetti's claims. According to Guardian writer Mark Pilkington, Ernetti's glory was short-lived. Another magazine revealed that Christ was a reversed image of a postcard from the Santuario del Amor Misericordioso in the town of Cola Valenza. More recently, doubt has been cast on his transcription of Theseus, and an apparent deathbed confession has also surfaced. The Iranian time machine. In April 2013, the Iranian news agency FARS, F-A-R-S, carried a story claiming a 27-year-old Iranian scientist had invented a time machine that allowed people to see into the future. A few days later, the story was removed and replaced with a story quoting an Iranian government official that no such device had been registered. Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project. Oh, stranger things. The Philadelphia experiment is the name given to a naval military experiment which was supposedly carried out at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. Or is it Transylvania? Sometime around the 28th of October, 1943. It is alleged that the U.S. Navy destroyer escort USS Elridge was to be rendered invisible or cloaked, quote unquote, to enemy devices. The experiment is also referred to as Project Rainbow. Some reports allege that the warship traveled back in time for about 10 seconds. However, popular culture has represented far bigger time jumps. The story is widely regarded as a hoax. The U.S. Navy maintains that no such experiment occurred, and details of the story contradict well-established facts about the Eldridge, as well as the known laws of physics. The Montauk Project was alleged to be a series of secret United States government projects conducted at Camp Hero or Montauk Air Force Station on Montauk, Long Island, for the purpose of exotic research, including time travel. Uh, Jacques Vallée describes allegations of the Montauk Project as an outgrowth of stories about the Philadelphia experiment. So let's do the time machine. Okay, so this is Wikipedia time travel. So time travel is the hypothetical activity of traveling into the past or future. Time travel is a widely recognized concept in philosophy and fiction, particularly science fiction. In fiction, time travel is typically achieved through the use of a hypothetical device known as a time machine. The idea of a time machine was popularized by H.G. Wells' 1895 novel, The Time Machine. It is uncertain whether time travel to the past would be physically possible. Such travel, if at all feasible, may give rise to questions of causality or causality. Forward time travel, outside the usual sense of the perception of time, is an extensively observed phenomenon and is well understood within the framework of special relativity and general relativity. However, making one body advance or delay more than a few milliseconds compared to another body is not feasible with current technology. As for backward time travel, it is possible to find solutions in general relativity that allow for it, such as a rotating black hole. Traveling to an arbitrary point in space-time has very limited support in theoretical physics and is usually connected only with quantum mechanics or wormholes. So the history of the concept. It is 411 or 411. What's the info? 74. The percentage. All right. So some ancient myths depict a character skipping forward in time. In Hindu mythology, the Vishnu Purana mentions the story of King Raivata Kakudni, who travels to heaven to meet the creator, Brahma, and is surprised to learn when he returns to earth that many ages have passed. The Buddhist Pali Canon mentions the relativity of time. The Payasi Sutta tells of one of the Buddha's chief disciples, Kumara Kassapa, who explains to the skeptic Payasi that time in the heavens passes differently than on earth. The Japanese tale of Urashima Taro, first described in the Manioshu, tells of a young fisherman named Urashima Noku who visits an undersea palace. The Little Mermaid. After 3 days, he returns home to his village and finds himself 300 years in the future, where he has been forgotten. His house is in ruins and his family has died. In Jewish tradition, the first century BC scholar Honi HaMegill is said to have fallen asleep and slept for 70 years. When waking up, he returned home but found none of the people he knew, and no one believed his claims of who he was. In Abrahamic religions, in Islam, the Quran narrates the story of the seven sleepers, a group of monotheistic young men who sought refuge in a cave to escape persecution. As they slept, Allah preserved them for centuries, and when they awoke, they discovered a changed world. This narrative, found in the Quranic Surah Al-Kahf, describes divine protection and time suspension. The story of the seven sleepers appears in a myth of the Christian religion, in which a group of young men were seeking to escape Roman persecution. Rome was a polytheistic empire at the time. In another story from Islam, Uzair, often identified with the biblical Ezra, experienced profound grief at the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. It is said that God took his soul and restored him to life after the city's reconstruction. Upon returning to his hometown, he went unrecognized by the people and his household, except for an elderly maid who, once blind, regained her sight through his prayers. During this reunion, Uzair also encountered his son, who, despite aging beyond him, recognized his father. Interesting. This shift to science fiction. Time travel themes in science fiction and the media can be grouped into three categories: immutable timeline, mutable timeline, and alternate histories, as in the interfacing many worlds interpretation. The non-scientific term timeline is often used to refer to all physical events in history, so that where events are changed, the time traveler is described as creating a new timeline. Now, my point is to get to the state gods, city-state gods, and we're going to talk about the ley lines of Chicago and the demon of Chicago. So this is a reddit.com post. Says that Chicago is one of the points of a double pentagram created by magnetic ley lines. The center of these pentagrams is Round Island. So let's look at that. Okay, so it goes back to the geometry of place.com. New Year's Geography Report. This latest geological evolution of North America's biorings and streams, the crop circles appearing in my head monthly, highlights the importance of the Great Lakes biome. Clicked into place by President Obama, this biome presents as a life-affirming PHI amidst the formative Vesica Pixis. Three largest rings centered on Shelburne Falls, Lake Itasca, and New Orleans, spelled OR apostrophe lands, share common vertices generating floweral life triangle Merkaba. Located central to these ring patterns is the New Madrid fault zone. New Madrid, surrounded by the Trail of Tears, is an earth heart geologically stretched east, west, north, and south. The past 20 years, presidents have ruled with an eye for the oil fields of Oklahoma and the money fields of New York City. With the Gaia political turn northwards to the great pentagonal waters, a new frequency pattern is keyed into our geography pattern of life. The consciousness streams coursing through these waters come from multiple efforts by divergent groups coalescing into a serpentine wave, isolating between the serpent lay and the Kira grid. The spear point of these alignments grounds in the ancient iron-laced granite of Lake Itasca, the headwaters of the Mississippi River. A subtle dynamic is evident as well in the choice of sites to co-generate a landscape medicine wheel centered on Wildcat Mountain in Ontario, Wisconsin. This wheel's proximity to the Great Lakes Ring and ley convergence suggests this as a likely place to infuse our collective efforts of earth healing across the continent into the Great Lakes spirit and biology. 420. A coalesce of frequency emerges in this map, suggesting a course of action that would potentially exponentially expand intention and hopefully generate a stable field of spirit to ride awake into our earth's changes. From wherever you live, include these portals of spirit in visualizing positive futures. Serpent lay is a wave from vibrating between the geomagnetic fields of the Canadian Shield and the Bermuda Triangle Ring. Named after the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, this lightning bolt through the land follows volcanic and ring pattern sequencing, military bases, and battlefields, driftless zone, and protoplanet Iron. The Serpent Mound itself being the primary site of the ley, its location marks where the stuff of stars, meteor, meets the stuff of earth, magma. This heaven and earth metaphor is seen written in the memories running throughout its ley. Operating in tandem with the serpent ley is the cultural ley being co-generated through the efforts of the Keurig Gridwork, Trinity Point Project, New Saqqara Pyramid, Wildcat Medicine Wheel, and the Lake Itasca tribes. The common cause amongst these groups is for healing all our relations, memories, connections, and land. Following in a close second, they hold an intention to trigger an elevated consciousness that lives in a greater proportion of the 90% of life, that great mystery spinning our web life. First Nations ley carries memories of Wounded Knee and Boston along its great circle. First Nations ley sites include Hawaii, Australia, and West Africa. This ley carries the indigenous mind in its great circle. The memories held in massacre, slaver, and genocidal sites along this ley diminishes the positive expression of this ley. The Kachina ley named for Hopi creator beings who bring rain from the San Francisco peaks to the Hopi Mesa. This alignment tones Omaha, Madison, a confluence city, Ottawa, Montreal, and Cape Breton, marking this lay as the Kachina Highway from the Baja Peninsula to Cape Breton Peninsula. These pathways of angels are tools of grace to help in our transformation as the saints come marching in. Use them with discernment. Okay, so that's just an overall of what the Native Americans would think. So let's do the Chicago ley lines. Chicago. This one looks good. Says Bloods and Fires, Weird Chicago. So Chicago is more than the physical city with its skyscrapers, its cultural centers, its slums, and its human cesspools, its middle class mediocrity, and its high society decadence. The city is more than a political machine or a haven for sports fans or a bastion of learning in the Midwest. Chicago is many cities, each existing in a different time and each coexisting along a time space continuum, half made of hard physics and soft memory. Chicago's shadows embody these different times and places, and where the real city intersects with one of these older places, or even Chicago's yet to come, twilight reigns. Halos and ley lines. Chicago is the focus of several major ley lines and halos. The most prominent of these are described here. The web of halos and ley lines sets the magical boundaries of the Chicago area and affects the practice of magic within the city and its surroundings. The most powerful lines of power that traverse the Chicago area are the Chicago River, the shoreline of Lake Michigan, and the borders of the Loop, Infinity. Right? Other smaller ley lines connect various halos within Chicago, but these three serve as major lifelines for the Mage community. The Chicago River. One of the area's most powerful ley lines, despite the pollution over the centuries since the city's founding, the Chicago River occupies a central position in the city. Its wide shape divides the city into the north, south, and west sides, with the lake forming what would have been the east side of the city, which I am currently. That very division into quarters has powerful magical correspondences with the four elements, the four directions, the four seasons, and the four corners of the earth. The three parts of the river's Y shape further divide the city into a region that is three parts earth to one part water, Lake Michigan. The element of earth is the least changeable of the primary four elements, indicative of Chicago's reluctance to change even when that alteration is for the better. The water in both the lake and river recalls the certainty that, however reluctant the city may be, change will come either through the erosive action of water on shoreline and riverbank or through more violent means such as floods and high water. The reversal of the Chicago River's flow direction has forever tainted the power in ley lines, however, causing the river to double back on itself and produce some strange resonances. The Lake Michigan shoreline. The shoreline of Lake Michigan is a separate ley line that circumscribes the city's eastern side. As part of the massive waterway of the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan holds an almost infinite supply of power, making it both a powerful hallow and a dynamic ley line that disperses its mana all along the city's eastern shore. By feeding the hallow of Lake Michigan, the shoreline's ley line serves to connect Chicago with every other city on the Great Lakes, from Chicago and Milwaukee to Erie and Buffalo. The loop perimeter. Not only do the streets of the loop delineate the area of financial power and commerce, they also funnel the flow of mana laced with the power of business and industry into and out of the region. Those who know how to tap the power of this concrete and plastic ley line discover a lifeline into the heart of the city itself. And that's that for that one. Very, very interesting stuff. So this is a Leyline Dresden Files on Fandom Wiki. So this says that ley lines are natural streams of magic running all over the world, often connecting places with outstanding supernatural energies and magic. So ley lines are made up of various kinds of energy. Whatever kinds are more prominent in the line affects its properties. There are, for example, ley lines with defensive, disruptive, or restorative energy. They can be tapped into by magic users to draw power from them. Using a ley line is the most powerful means of employing magic known to mortal wizards. Some might be more stable, which means that it is better to use when a stable flow of energy is needed. Others might have destructive energies, which means it is better to use in battle. The island Demon Reach has a ley line that has certain malevolent properties. This makes people who go near the island unconsciously veer away. Many ways to the Never Never run from confluence to confluence. A wizard can feel their power when they walk over them. The Great Lakes region has a great deal of ley lines, which account for the heightened supernatural activity of the area. Ley lines with heavy concentrations of dark energy run through both North and South Manitou Island in the north of Lake Michigan, and the Secret Islands in the lake center, including Demon Reach. Another ley line runs directly beneath the Field Museum in Chicago. It's giving Ghostbusters. The ley lines that intersect deep in the ground under the Ald Rock and the White Council headquarters contain a staggering amount of raw power, and it's one of the world's largest ley line convergences. These ley lines are used in order to create super-powered ward without a threshold covering the entire building. Presumably, the wards constantly draw from the ley lines if strained. Chicago is a crossroads, both physically and metaphysical, with ley lines having dozens of confluences that either run through town or nearby. Another large confluences of ley lines Itza in Mexico. It's one of the biggest in the world. The Red Court stashed their ritual gear and artifacts near ley lines and influences. In the series Small Favor, the Order of the Blackened Denarius used ley lines to empower a circle prison to contain the archive on the island of Demon Reach. They would not have been able to hold her without the strength of the ley line assisting with their super circle. In Changes, soon after arriving in Chichen Itza, Harry Dresden felt the ley line that ran under his feet and found that it held an enormous current of raw earth magic. He tapped into it and was overwhelmed by the rush of imagery and sensations of the earth's plates creating mountains for one. He pulled out some of its power and released it in a spell. Gravity vanished. The horde of vampires that had been charging them left the earth and were smashed back down again, killing most of them. In Cold Days, Harry Dresden started to mark the location of nodes or points where ley lines intersected on a map. Lake Michigan, Molly Carpenter stated that Auntie Leah taught them to her a few months prior. So when it was coined in the 1920s, the term ley line originally referred to the apparent alignment of landmarks, religious sites, and man-made structures. The idea of these lines as magically or spiritually significant dates from the 1960s. Okay, now, okay, so what did I learn today? The word mata, which is uh, Spanish for he kills, and also the name of the Memphis, Tennessee transportation. Just very interesting. Um, okay, so we did the 88 Travelers. Um, okay, the Chicago Demon, Demon of Chicago. Don't know what that has to do with anything, but the devil in the white city is what popped up. There's also the house down the alley has white on the garbage can. The serial killer at the World's Fair, Murder Castle, murdering. Okay, what are we looking for? That's not what I'm looking for. Maybe I am. Devil in White City. It looks like it keeps trying to lead me to the World Fair. Demons of New Chicago. The Rage Demon. The River Demon, Chicago Portage. Let me look that up. The River Demon, Chicago Portage. The monster. Sorry, I be having to go with my brain tell me. So let's see. The Chicago Portage was an ancient portage that connected the Great Lakes waterway system with the Mississippi River system. Connecting these two great water trails meant comparatively easy access from the mouth of the St. Lawrence River on the Atlantic Ocean to the Rocky Mountains and the Gulf of Mexico. The approximately 6-mile length had been used by Native Americans for thousands of years during the pre-Columbian era for travel and trade. In the summer of 1673, members of the Kaskaskia, a tribe of the Illinois Confederation, led French explorers Louis Joliet and Father Jacques Marquette, the first known Europeans to explore this part of North America, to the portage. A strategic location, it became a key to European activity in the Midwest, ultimately leading to the foundation of Chicago. Where's Waldo? The portage crossed waterways and wetlands between the Chicago River and the Des Plaines River through a gap in the Valparaiso moraine. In 1848, the water divide was breached by the Illinois and Michigan I&M Canal, cutting through the portage. This was deepened and widened in 1900 by the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, which was also used to control the water's directional flow. Just reading about this yesterday, I think. So, says that it was created by a glacier. The history of the Chicago Portage begins at the end of the last ice age. It was formed as the Wisconsin glaciation retreated northward about 10,000 years ago, leaving behind Lake Chicago, now called Lake Michigan, which was created from the glacier's meltwater. As the glacier melted and retreated, the water in Lake Chicago rose until it overflowed the southwestern edge of the Valparaiso moraine, which encircles the lake's southern half, creating the Chicago Outlet River. This was a substantial river comparable to today's Niagara River. And over time, it carved the channel later used by the main and south branch of the Chicago River, the Des Plaines River, and the terrain that became the Chicago Portage. As the glacier continued to retreat, it opened another outlet far to the east that became the St. Lawrence River. This allowed the emerging lakes to drain even faster, and the Chicago Outlet River dried up, leaving the gap in the moraine that served the Chicago Portage. The Chicago Portage linked what became known as the Chicago River's South Branch and what became known as the Des Plaines River. The point at which the portage crossed the low continental divide that separated waters flowing east towards Lake Michigan from waters flowing west toward the Mississippi River was a wetland that occupied the ancient stream bed of the Chicago Outlet River. Early settlers called this marshy area Mud Lake. The total length of the portage was about 6 miles. Mud Lake could be wet, dry, marshy, or frozen, depending on the season and the weather, making it a difficult, albeit very valuable, transportation route. In very wet weather, the water level in both the Des Plaines River and the Chicago River would rise to the point that Mud Lake was flooded, and the travelers could traverse the entire 6 miles by canoe. Usually, however, particularly late summer, it was necessary to pull out canoes at some point and carry them and all supplies around Mud Lake. A key to travel and trade in North America. The Chicago Portage allowed easy access by boat to almost all of North America, from the mouth of the St. Lawrence River to the Rocky Mountains and the Gulf of Mexico. The St. Lawrence River Divide. Until the second half of the 19th century, water transportation was virtually the only way to move goods and people around North America. Hence, connections between strategic waterways, usually involving portages, held special importance. The importance of the Chicago Portage lies in the fact that the channel cut by the Chicago Outlet River created an easy passage over the St. Lawrence River Divide, the continental divide that separated what had become the Great Lakes waterway system from the Mississippi River waterway system, and, as the illustration shows, opened up almost all of what was to become the United States, from the Allegheny Mountains to the Rocky Mountains, as far south as the Gulf of Mexico. To the two mountains of brass is what I just heard. Let me write this down. Hold on. Allegheny and the Rockies. Okay. So the early peoples. Native Americans had used the portage for almost 2,000 years before the arrival of Europeans. The portage was probably created around 500 BCE, at the end of what is commonly referred to as the Archaic period. Early people had been migrating into the region around the portage since the Paleo-Indian period, and by the time of the formation of the portage, these people had begun to create semi-permanent settlements. Archaeological evidence shows that long-distance trade routes had been established. Late archaic sites that have been uncovered around the Chicago area have revealed shells from the Gulf Coast, Galena from the Galena, Illinois area, and copper from Lake Superior. The Woodland period, 500 BCE to 1000 CE, followed the Archaic. The Hopewell culture, 200 BCE to 500 CE, that arose during this time saw further development of these trade networks, as well as the appearance of pottery. Hopewell tribes engaged in extensive trade. This trade network is now called the Hopewell Interaction Sphere, and the part that encompassed Illinois, the Havana Hopewell, played a major part. Since at this time, most long-distance travel for trade purposes was via water, it is likely that during this Woodland period, the Chicago Portage was first regularly used. The Mississippian period, 1000 to 1600, followed the Woodland. During this time, Native people built more permanent settlements and continued to expand trading networks. Cahokia was the largest of these settlements and the best example of how Native society was evolving. It was located at the confluence of the Mississippi River, the Missouri River, and the Illinois River, and was therefore a key to the trade network that had developed. Given that copper from the northern shores of Lake Superior had been found at archaeological digs at Cahokia, and that Mississippian pottery has been found at sites at northern Lake Huron, it is likely that the Chicago Portage was regularly used during this period. During all of this time, early Native Americans found the Chicago Portage to be a convenient transportation route between the Great Lakes region and the Mississippi River in the interior. The first Europeans. By 1673, the French had established a trading post at present-day Mackinac Island at the top of Lake Michigan. In that year, Jean-Baptiste Talon, the first intendant administrator of New France, having heard of reports of a great river to the west and hoping it would be the long-sought Northwest Passage to the Pacific Ocean, ordered a reconnaissance mission to find and explore this river. Okay, so now we're finding the wolf. Okay. In May of that year, the group consisting of Louis Joliet, Father Jacques Marquette, and 5 voyagers set out on their voyage of discovery. So that was 1, 2, 5, 7. Okay, 7 people. Accordingly, on the 17th day of May, 1673, we started from the mission of St. Ignace at Michilimackinac, where I then was. The joy that we felt at being selected for this expedition animated our courage and rendered the labor of paddling from morning to night agreeable to us. That is Marquette. The explorers found the Mississippi River, explored it, and then returned to Michilimackinac by a different route on the advice of Native Americans they had encountered along the way, who told them that there was a better way to return to Lake Michigan. Traveling by stages up the Illinois River to the Des Plaines River in September 1673, members of the Kaskaskia, a tribe of the Illinois Confederation, led Joliet and Marquette to the western end of what became known as the Chicago Portage. During the 18th century, the Chicago Portage was one of the most strategic locations in the interior of the North American continent for the French. In particular, it provided an easy connection between the French cities of Montreal and New Orleans. An indication of the importance of portages that potentially could make this connection is shown in early maps of the region. For example, this French map of the western regions of New France, published 1755, shows the Riviere at Port de Chicago River and Port of Chicago, the Chicago River, and the Portage des Chênes, the portage of oak trees, the name the French originally attached to the portage. Crossing the portage. If water level in the portage was high enough to allow passage by canoe for most of the way, passage across the portage was relatively easy. Accounts from soldiers stationed at Fort Dearborn at the mouth of the Chicago River describe a passage from east to west. Starting at the west end of the portage at the Des Plaines River, they paddled east through Portage Creek and through the marsh that would later be known as Mud Lake. At the east end of the marsh, they portaged their boats, equipment, and supplies over a low rise of land that was the St. Lawrence River Continental Divide. They then entered the south branch of the Chicago River and paddled north to the fort. If water levels in the portage were low, passage was difficult, in part due to the soft or waterlogged ground. In 1818, Gurdon Hubbard, then 16 years old and traveling with the brigade of voyagers as an indentured clerk, crossed the portage from east to west and left an account in his memoirs. They had traveled down to the portage from Mackinac Island in Bateau. heavy flat-bottomed boats. They traveled down the south branch of the Chicago River and pulled their boats over the St. Lawrence Continental Divide into Mud Lake where the water was deep enough to float them. Then, four men only remained in a boat and pushed with these poles, while six or eight others waded in the mud alongside, and by united efforts, constantly jerking it along, like the way that sounds, so that from early dawn to dark, we succeeded only in passing a part of our boats through the Aux Plains, or the Des Plaines River outlet, where we found the first hard ground. Other members of the crew carried the boat's cargo across the 7-mile long land trail to the Des Plaines River. Because of his status as clerk of the expedition, by virtue of his ability to read and write, Hubbard was spared this hard work. He went on to describe the hardships of crossing the portage in its natural state. While a part of our crew were thus employed, others bruised themselves in transporting our goods on their backs to the river. It was a laborious day for all. Those who waded through the mud frequently sank to their waists, and at times were forced to cling to the side of the boat to prevent going over their heads. Okay, now, so we got mud. What did it say? Mud. Island. That ain't what it said. I think that's Mud Lake. Mud Lake and Mud Island. The Demon of the West. Of the Northwest. All right, here we go. So I've talked about this demon before, and we're going to cover it again because of the location that I am reading about. So the demon of the Northwest. I don't know. Sorry, from here. Hold on. Okay, so I lost a lot of my notes, so I've had all this stuff down packed before, but I have to do it all over again. So, okay, we're just gonna read about the um. This is the demon of the southwest wind, and maybe it'll lead us into the demon of the northwest. So let's go. This is Pazuzu. In ancient Mesopotamian religion, Pazuzu is a personification of the southwestern wind and held kingship over the Lilu wind demons. As an apotropaic entity, he is considered as both a destructive and dangerous wind, but also as a repellent to other demons, one who safeguards the home from their influence. In particular, he protects pregnant women and mothers, whom he could defend from the machinations of the demoness Lamashtu, his rival. He is invoked in ritual, and representations of him are used as defense charms. Hanpu is his father. He has connections to other wind deities such as Lamashtu and the Lilu demons, other protective demons, and the foreign Egyptian dwarf deity Bes. Okay, I guess Spirit wants me to read this, so I'm going to continue. Then we'll go find the northwest. All right. So his function. He has two chief aspects. Firstly, as a demon of the home, as a domestic spirit, and secondly, as the wandering wind demon, traversing the mountains where he presents a more wild character. He, as a domestic protector deity, there is a well documented use of him in Mesopotamian white magic. His inhuman and grotesque form can be inferred to have been used to frighten away unwanted guests, as well as prevent his wind demon subjects from entering the home and wreaking havoc. His role in ritual and magic is documented on inscriptions on the backs of his statues or in ritual texts. Spells, incantations, and special artifacts were used to gain the favor and protection of the demon. Such artifacts being placed in and around the home or worn on the person to achieve the desired effect. Protective objects. Large numbers of Pazuzu heads have been discovered made from a variety of materials, chiefly terracotta, but also bronze, iron, gold, glass, and bone. Idolatry. These heads often feature holes or loops at the top, allowing them to be worn on necklaces by pregnant women in order to protect the baby from evil forces. Occasionally, the heads would be attached to cylinder seals or worn as brooches as well. Some of these heads have been found in graves. Carved amulets are common. Ritual texts from Uruk state that a woman could be given a bronze necklace or amulet of him in order to protect her from miscarrying via the interference of Lamashtu. Some are rectangular, showing him in either standing or crouching pose. Larger amulets made from stone could be hung on the wall to protect the room or entrance. One of this type of amulet that was found inside a home in the Neo-Assyrian town of Dur Katlimu was lying on the floor of the main reception room and was thought to have been hung on the wall facing the entryway. Given the number of artifacts uncovered, it can be inferred that he enjoyed great popularity, and based upon the uniformity of the heads, amulets, and statues, it has even been speculated that such representations of the demon god was mass produced. In ritual texts relating to the representations of him, text inscriptions on the backs of representations or on tablets would invoke or otherwise mention him. A ritual text from Assyria prescribes a Pazuzu head as a way to banish sickness. Similarly, a ritual incantation against Lamastu from the late Babylonian period instructs how to make a Pazuzu necklace and hanging it around the afflicted person's neck. King of the evil wind demons. In the bilingual Sumerian and Akkadian version of the compendia, he identifies himself: I am Pazuzu, son of Hanbu, king of the evil Lilu demons. I was enraged in violent motion against the strong mountains and ascended them. Another text, also narrated by him, describes him encountering other Lilu demons in his travels and breaking their wings, therefore preventing them from inflicting harm. I ascended a mighty mountain that shook. and the evil winds I encountered there were heading west. One by one, I broke their wings. In another text, he is perceived as more malicious, as the narrator addresses him as agony of mankind, suffering of mankind, and disease of mankind. And the acronyms of those is AOM or OM, SOM, and DOM, like domination. And chants telling the demon to not enter the home. Okay. According to Eckhart Fram's study, the appearance of Pazuzu has remained fairly uniform throughout his history. He is depicted as a combination of diverse animal and human parts. Chimera. His body of canine form, though scaled, not furred, with birds as talons for feet, 2 pairs of wings, a scorpion's tail, and a serpentine peen. Keep it PG, guys. All right, so he holds his right hand up and his left hand down. His face is striking with gazelle horns, human ears, a dog-like muzzle, bulging eyes, and wrinkles on the cheeks. I have encountered this demon. He actually bit my lip off. That's another story. So demonic relationships. Parents and siblings. His father is Hanpu, the staggering one, or the perverted one. That's interesting. So his father is he limp and he a perverted limp. I don't know. It sounds like pimp. I don't know. Anyway, wind demons. Lilu, meaning wind. Demons are the class to which he and his subjects belong. There is a connection to the earlier Babylonian personifications of the 4 winds. These beings, as depicted on several cylinder seals, have wings, and each represents a different wind direction: south, east, west, and north. Franz Wigerman calls attention to the crooked positioning of the masculine west wind in seals, as similar to posture in Pazuzu's iconography. More connections appear in later seals, as this same bent over figure takes on talons and a scorpion's tail. The main difference in their depictions is the head. Thus, Wigerman concludes that it is his body and not his head that denotes him as a wind demon. Another scholar, Scott Noble, asserts that his possession of 4 wings links to the term Kapatu, meaning circle, loop, circumference, and totality. Remember Chicago, the train, confirmed, L, loop, Chicago loop, C-L, Chicago loop, sealed, ceiling, height. Okay, that's a little bit much. Okay, so suggesting his control over all cardinal directions of wind inherited from his predecessors. Lamastu. The baby snatching Lamastu was attested as both a subject of and an antagonist of Pazuzu. It is theorized that he could have been created specifically as a counter to her. Initially, she existed as an independent demoness with no distinct connection to other demons. Then, in the late Bronze Age, she took on the Lilu demon classification. Thus, Pazuzu was introduced as a way to chase her from the home and back into the underworld. It does also seem to be that Pazuzu's first appearances and Lamastu's reassigning as a Lilu both originate from the same time and place, the Middle Assyrian Empire, but this could be a coincidence. On one Lamastu amulet, a scene shows Pazuzu chasing the demoness away from her victim, while another displays him destroying it. On a Neo-Assyrian bronze plaque, his head is perched above the top of the plaque, and a smaller version of him in the scene is chasing her away down a river. Other protective spirits also appear in the plaque, including Akpalu and other animal-headed demons, there to protect the person who is lying down on a bed. Some scholars believe that Egyptian demon Bes is a counterpart of Pazuzu. Both are known to be protector demons in the home. They have iconographic links, both having lion parts, wings, a distinctly long phallus, and similar facial features. There are noted similarities between the positioning of the two on protective amulets as well. Another close connection is their association with the protection of pregnant women and mothers. There is evidence that the two were in each other's cultural spheres. A possible Pazuzu figure was found in Egypt, as well as Bes amulets uncovered in sites in Iran. In a 7th century era fort in Nimrud, 5 Pazuzu heads were found near a Bes amulet. One theory posits a connection in their names, that Bes, like Pazuzu, could have been derived from the king named Bazi, or Bazi, B-A-Z-I. Although Pazuzu's name has not yet been proven to have originated from Bazi, nor it is speculated has Bes's name been proven to be of foreign origin. Other protective demons. On some amulets, Pazuzu appears alongside Ugalu and Lulav, protective deities who were thought to solely benefit mankind. Thus, their presences here may be apotropaic, or deployed to minimize Pazuzu's maleficent aspect. Their common positioning on the back of the amulet out of sight of the viewer could suggest the latter. They have also been present on the back of half-relief Pazuzu heads, again out of sight. In mythology, he is the god of the southwestern wind and is associated with the plague. He was invoked in apotropaic amulets, which combat the powers of his rival, the malicious goddess Lamashtu, who was believed to cause harm to mother and child during childbirth. Although he is considered an evil spirit, he was called upon to ward off other malicious spirits. He would protect humans against any variety of misfortune or plague. In history, according to Wigerman, the Pazuzu figure suddenly appeared in the early Iron Age. His first visual depictions are not attested until the 8th century BC, with the first finds being in the tombs of Nimrod, and his first appearances in text traced to the 7th century BC. The majority of his representations were found in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, with the most recent finds dating back to the time of the Seleucid Empire. Seal. There are several theories for his precise origin, but none have been definitely proven. The name. One speculation for the origin of the name Pazuzu connects to Bazi, as named in the Tell Leland version of the Sumerian king list, who was a king of Mari. The name is followed by that of the succeeding king, Zizi. Bazi's name is preceded by Anbu, his father, who was suspected to have inspired the god Anbu, which later conflated into Hanbu, Pazuzu's father. The theory goes that given the connection between Anbu and Hanbu, it could be that the name Pazuzu is a construction of the following kings' names: Bazi Zizi. Bazi Zizi. Sounds like you're trying to put me to sleep. Zizi. Like Pazuzu, Humbaba was used as a protector deity, with depictions of his frightening head being used to ward off evil. It could therefore be speculated that the Pazuzu heads replaced those of Humbaba. Humbaba fell from favor in the late Bronze Age, shortly after Pazuzu emerged. Although the two do not share any great iconographic connection, making it unlikely that Pazuzu could have evolved from the earlier deity. Another speculation is that rather than Bes and Pazuzu having a common origin point, Pazuzu was an offshoot of Bes. He is most famous in Western popular culture due to the 1971 novel The Exorcist and its 1973 film adaptation, The Exorcist. In both instances, he is the evil spirit that possesses the young girl Reagan McNeil. So I didn't see a direct link to the, I'm going to say, the Demon of the West Wind. I could have just went to the Four Winds. Demon of West. Is it Tupac? All right, here we go. Ooh, I'm hungry now. All right, so this says Zephyrus is the Greco-Roman god who personifies the west wind. He is one of the Anemoi, the four principal wind deities of Greek mythology, who were the progeny of Eos and Austrias of Typhoeus. Okay, okay, yeah, let's do the four winds. To the four winds. So maybe it's something about the demons from different locations crossing boundaries. What I'm getting. Let's see, it's a Zuzu in the Bible. A fallen angel or a demon god. Death and devastation. Mesopotamian wind. The boogeyman. The four winds of Mesopotamia. The four winds are a group of mythical figures in Mesopotamian mythology whose names and functions correspond to four cardinal directions of wind. They were both cardinal concepts used for mapping and understanding geographical features in relation to each other, as well as characters with personality who could serve as antagonistic forces or helpful assistants in myths. Functions and iconography. The concept of the four winds originated in Sumer before 3000 BC, while older theories posited that the ancient Mesopotamians had a concept of cardinality similar to modern day with a north, east, south, and west. It was more likely that their directions were framed around these four principal winds. The Akkadian word for cardinality is equivalent to the word for wind. J. Newman names these winds as the regular wind, northwest, the mountain wind, northeast, the cloud wind, southeast, and the Amorite wind, southwest. Okay. Okay. Now, these wind directions could be used to establish the presence of astrological bodies, orient maps, and direct the layout of cities and home construction, keeping buildings open to wind blowing in and alleviating the heat. These winds, aside from being used for cardinality, were also figures important to mythology and general culture in Mesopotamia. As figures, the four winds have been identified with four winged beings on cylinder seals. Three are male, the northeast, northwest, and southwest winds, and one, the south wind or southeast wind, is female. Very interesting. Now stay with me now. Franz Wigerman also discusses an association between the winds, which he denotes as NES and W, and various constellations, Ursa Major as the north wind, Pisces as the south wind, Scorpio as the west wind, and the Pleiades as the east wind. Sometimes in incantation they are called upon as guardians. In one particular text, the south and east winds are singled out as being guarding winds. No clear genealogy is known for the winds other than that they thought of they're thought of as siblings. They are affiliated with Anu in some texts as his creations or his messengers. One Sumerian proverb describes them. The north wind is the wind of satisfaction. The south wind overthrows the men it hits. The east wind is the wind that brings rain, and the west wind is mightier than the man living there. The northwest or regular wind. The name for this wind, referred to sometimes as the north wind in earlier scholarship, can mean normal, regular, or favorable wind. This wind is likely what is called today as the shamal, the most predictable wind in the Persian Gulf region. Most often portrayed as a good force, a gentle wind that is reliable, thought as having some connections to the goddess Ninlil, as well as Adad and Ninurta. The northeast, east, or mountain wind, usually translated simply as the east wind, the etymology of the name is likely mountain wind or direction of the mountains. It is argued that this wind should be referred to as the northeast wind, stemming from the direction of the wind blowing off the Zagros mountain chain being centered around the northeast. This wind, in one ritual text, is referred to as a friend of the king Naram Sin and is also speculated to be associated with Enlil. The southeast or cloud wind. Usually translated as south wind, the name of this wind likely means cloud wind. This wind may correlate to a modern day counterpart, the Kaus, Kaus, which blows around the south and east and is associated with the rain and thunderstorms of the wet season. This wind is speculated to be feminine or female, as it is referred to with feminine pronouns in text and has been connected to the female winged figure on cylinder seals. She also has a connection to the god Ea or Ea and was speculated to have taken on a more divine role, gaining a horned crown of divinity and losing her wings in later depictions. Sometimes this wind is characterized positively, but also had an evil aspect as a demonic wind that needed to be chased away. The southwest or Amorite wind, translated typically as the west wind, possibly denotes a stormy wind or a wind originating from the place where the sun sets. The name Amorite wind comes from the Assyrian Babylonian term for this wind, Amuru, corresponding to the Amorite peoples who inhabited regions in the west and northwest relative to the Babylonian territory. This wind is speculated to be associated with Anu. There is little characterization of this wind in text, leading to theories that the image of this wind was repurposed and evolved into the demon Pazuzu. Appearances and myths. In Enuma Elish, Marduk marshals the four winds to assist in trapping the monstrous Tiamat. These winds were said to be given to him by Anu. The text also describes him summoning and unleashing seven evil winds similar to those wielded by Ninurta in the Anzu epic. The south wind appears in the myth of Adapa as an antagonistic force, preventing the sage from fishing in the sea and sinking his boat. In response, Adapa breaks the wind's wing, causing Anu to summon him to court when he realizes that the wind has stopped blowing. Stephanie Daly or Daly argues that the south wind is female in the myth, with the other three winds as her brothers. In some versions of Gilgamesh, the winds are guides to the hero and his friend Enkidu, helping them navigate the cedar forest on the orders of Utu. Relationship to other mythological figures. The demon Pazuzu, who first appeared in the early Iron Age, likely draws his iconography and much of his character from the four winds. He is also assigned the role of king over the Lilu or wind demons as a category. Franz Wigerman claims that due to iconographic links, a shared crouching posture, Pazuzu may have been derived specifically from the masculine west wind. There are also theories that his possessing four wings represents his control over the totality of the wind demons. In one myth, he narrates ascending a mountain where he encounters other winds and breaking their wings. Egyptian counterparts. Ancient Egyptian texts also have personifications of four winds representing cardinal directions. These winds have some iconographic links to their Mesopotamian counterparts, both groups possessing wings, but they are described in the coffin text and other rituals as having more chimera-like bodies with other animal parts. In the Book of the Dead, they are said to come from different openings in the sky, while in another myth, they were created in a divine falcon beat its wings. Okay. And the last thing is the crossroads. Crossroads demon. See if we can find the one in Chicago. We know about the one in Mississippi. Okay, this is the Supernatural, the TV show Crossroads Demon. Oh, error. Not found. Oh, yeah, some haters. Apache 215. Oh, okay. Let's try that again. Oh, yeah, some haters. Okay. Okay. Crossroad Blues, commonly known as Crossroads, is a song written by the American blues artist Robert Johnson. It always leads back to him, doesn't it? He performed it solo with his vocal and acoustic slide guitar in the Delta blues style. The song has become part of the Robert Johnson mythology as referring to the place where he sold his soul to the devil in exchange for musical genius. This is based largely on folklore of the American South that identifies a crossroads as the site where Faustian bargains can be made, as the lyrics do not contain any references to Satan. Crossroad Blues may have been in Johnson's repertoire since 1932, and on November 27, 1936, he recorded two takes of the song. One was released in 1937 as a single that was heard mainly in the Mississippi Delta area. The second, which reached a wider audience, was included on King of Delta Blues Singers, a compilation album of some of Johnson's songs released in 1961 during the American Folk Music Festival. Over the years, several bluesmen have recorded versions of the song, usually as ensemble pieces with electrified guitars. Electrified guitars. One second. Okay. So Elmore James recordings in 1954 and 1960 through 61 have been identified as perhaps the most significant of the earlier renditions. Guitarist Eric Clapton and the British rock group Cream popularized the song as Crossroads on their 1968 Wheels of Fire album, and their fiery blues rock interpretation became one of their best known songs and inspired many cover versions. Both Johnson and Cream's recordings of the song have received accolades from various organizations and publications. Both have also led the song to be identified as a blues standard, as well as an important piece in the repertoires of blues-inspired rock musicians. Clapton continues to be associated with the song and has used the name for Crossroads Center he founded on Antigua to help people recover from addictions, and the Crossroads guitar festivals he organized to raise money for it. Gunter Hotel, San Antonio, Texas. In October 1936, Johnson auditioned for the talent scout H.C. Spear in Jackson, Mississippi. Spear recommended Johnson to Ernie Ortle, then a representative for Arc Records. After a second audition, Ortle arranged for Johnson to travel to San Antonio for a recording session. Johnson recorded 22 songs for Arc over 3 days from November 23rd to 27th, 1936. 3 days, 22 songs is 322. Skull and Bones, 533 right now. Okay, now during the first session, then it was 1936, 36. Okay. He recorded his most commercially appealing songs. They mostly represented his original pieces and reflected current piano-influenced musical trends. The songs include Terraplane Blues, his first single and most popular record, along with Sweet Home Chicago and I Believe I'll Dust My Broom, which became blues standards after others recorded them. A second and third recording date took place in San Antonio after a 2-day break. Johnson reached back into his long-standing repertoire for songs to record. The material reflects the styles of country blues performers Charlie Patton and Son House, who influenced Johnson in his youth and are among Johnson's most heartfelt and forceful. Crossroad Blues was recorded on Friday, November 27, 1936, during Johnson's third session in San Antonio. The recordings continued at an improvised studio in room 414 at the Gunter Hotel. Art producer Don Law supervised the recording, but it is unknown what input, if any, he had into Johnson's selection of material to record or how to present it. Two somewhat similar takes of the song were recorded. A crossroads, or an intersection of rural roads, is one of the few landmarks in the Mississippi Delta. A flat, featureless plain between the Mississippi and Yazoo rivers. It is part of the local iconography, and several businesses may use the crossroads its name, such as gas stations, banks, and retail shops. A crossroads is also where cars are more likely to slow down or stop, thus presenting the best opportunity for a hitchhiker. In the simplest reading, Johnson describes his grief at being unable to catch a ride at an intersection before the sun sets. Many see different levels of meaning, and some have attached a supernatural significance to the song. Both versions of the song open with the protagonist kneeling at a crossroads to ask God's mercy. The second section tells of his failed attempts to hitch a ride. In the third and fourth sections, he expresses apprehension at being stranded as darkness approaches and asks that his friend Willie Brown be advised that I'm sinking down. The first take of the song, which was used for the single, includes a fifth verse that is not included in the second take. In it, he laments not having a sweet woman in his distress. According to authors Bruce Conforth and Gail Dean Wardlow, many blues fans and even some scholars had attempted to link this song to some satanic or Faustian bargain as an explanation for how quickly Johnson progressed from being an average musician to an accomplished one. Folklore of the southern United States identifies a crossroads or graveyard as the site of a pact with the devil, which music writer Elijah Wald identifies as a likely source of the myth. Another source may be Delta bluesman Tommy Johnson, no relation to Robert, who promoted himself as having made a deal with the devil. Wald writes, as for Crossroad Blues, The satanic connection has to be made by first citing the Tommy Johnson story, tracing it through the ancient beliefs in a dark spirit who appears at the meeting of pathways, then jury rigging it to fit a song that never suggests any such thing. Although Crossroad Blues does not contain any references to Satan or a Faustian bargain, Robert Johnson later recorded two songs that include such themes: Hellhound on My Trail, tales of trying to stay ahead of the demon hound that is pursuing him, and in Me and the Devil Blues, he sings, "Early this morning when you knocked upon my door and I said, 'Hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go.'" These songs contribute to the Faustian myth, but how much Johnson promoted the idea is debated. Music historian Ted Gioia believes that the use of satanic themes and imagery generated much needed publicity for blues musicians who were struggling through the Great Depression. Blues historian Samuel Charters sees the song as having elements of protest and social commentary. The second verse includes, "The sun going down now, boy, dark don't catch me here," a reference to the sundown laws or curfew during racial segregation in the United States. Johnson, as an African American, may be expressing a real fear of loitering charges or even lynching. Others suggest that the song is about a deeper and more personal loneliness. Writers Barry Lee Pearson and Bill McCullough feel that the fifth verse in the single version captures the essence of the song. Left alone, abandoned, or mistreated, he stands at the crossroad looking this way or that for his woman. Composition. Crossroad Blues reflects Johnson's Delta blues roots and may have been in his repertoire since 1932. It is the first recording to show his mastery of his mentor's son House's style, particularly in his slide guitar work. Music historian Edward Komara identifies parts of straight Balky blues. Okay, guys, we're gonna finish this tomorrow. The Crossroads and Demons of the State or City. See you guys later. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.